So really, really good day the other day. That ended pretty terribly, but an important lesson learned. So not all was lost, I guess. I had a fairly short opportunity to get some shooting in. It was really just like, hey, you're there, you got a chance, just take your camera with you and just make it work. It was one of those days. All in all, any day that you get out to go practice is a good day. So I had to run an errand into the city. I decided to stop by Wall Street because I knew I was going to have lots of long shadows. It was exactly the time of day where you kind of start getting a lot of light peeking through little spaces and stuff. And I figured I would have about a half hour to shoot a roll, or almost 2 rolls. It's the GS645 Professional. How professional it actually is, I don't know, because it's mostly plastic. It works really well. It looks really good. It's got this really cool looking, what I would call a bull bar. It's there to protect the lens. It just protrudes in and out. It moves a lot when you focus. And either it's telling me that that lens is really fragile, or it's saying, hey, here's a cool design element from the 80s or 90s that's going to make your camera look really interesting. I've had this camera now for a fairly long time, and I really, really enjoy it. It has its quirks, but there's really only 1 or 2 quirks that it has, and they're not even really quirks considering that this is a medium format camera, and that's how big that is. Yeah, it's 6 by 4.5 or 645, which some people kind of turn their nose up at, and they go, you might as well shoot 35 millimeter. No, those people should shut up, because it is a much bigger negative than 35 millimeter. You can get much less grain on the film depending on the developer that you use in your process. You get so much more resolution. In fact, you get twice as much resolution. If I'm wrong, just go ahead and shit on me for it. Like I said, I enjoy this camera a lot. It's just a chunky boy, even though it's compact for a medium format camera. It reminds me a lot of these older like Zeiss and Voigtlander cameras that like fold open and they have that bellows come out. They're kind of wide and they have the 2 knobs for advancing the film. They're just fun cameras, but this is, I would consider this a little bit of a step up from those cameras because it has a meter in it. You don't absolutely need a meter, especially if you're shooting black and white. I don't really rely on the meter on this camera too much anyway. I do when I shoot slide film. Slide film at 645 is unbelievable. But I was shooting HP5 and Tri-X. I had a roll of HP5 in here that I pushed to stop to 800, which for HP5 is not that big of a deal. Most people start at 800. And I figured what I was going to do was I was going to develop it in DDX because I knew that was not going to be enough. I threw a roll of Tri-X, very fresh Tri-X that I got, and I decided that I'm going to push that Tri-X to 1600 because the sun was setting, even though this was around 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and the sun these days is setting like a little bit after 5. So the first roll in here was mostly shot already. It was a lot of family photos, which, you know, I don't really share. The second roll worked out. So I get off the train. I got this guy with me and I took my XS20 Fuji, which is all the video is being shot on that camera. I get out there and it kind of feels like the old days. And by the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, I think I got 3 or 4 photos that I won't absolutely hate between a roll and a half that I ended up getting to shoot. But I developed myself that first roll. HP5. Man, I ruined it because I got lazy. And how I got lazy is this. Since I developed my own black and whites, usually in DDX or Rodinal. And right now I'm trying out D76 again after many, many years. I use a Patterson tank, and I use a rather large one. Once in a while, I like to develop 2 rolls of 120 film, and this is really good for that. So usually, these Patterson tanks, these reels, right? If you're using one reel, these Patterson tanks come with a little clip to keep the reel at the base, so when you're agitating, they don't get pushed up. And usually, if they get pushed up, you finish your agitation, right? They should, if you're agitating with the same amount of force for each turn, in theory, settle at the bottom. So I usually use those clips, but for the past few months, I've gotten lazy and nothing has gone wrong, except this time. Finished developing. I open it up, take a look before I start fixing, and the reel's sitting on top of the water. And I'm like, oh crap. So there were 2 things that went wrong, and one of them I ended up fixing. The other one did not work out, and it ruined the roll, even though I was able to recover just the hints of what was on the negative. So when I'm pouring fixer back out from the first roll that I developed, my brother calls me. I pick up the phone. I have left a little bit, about, half a reel's worth of fixer in my beaker or whatever. I get on the phone with him. When I got off the phone with him, I walked in, I checked the temperature of what was in the beaker, which was fixer. And I added water to get to 500 milliliters. So, when I put my thermometer in, I'm like, oh, 68 degrees, perfect. I didn't realize that that was fixer that I had left in there. My brain's telling me, because it's 68 degrees, that's water that you left in that beaker. So I put fixer in. If you pour fixer into your negatives, well, that's it. It destroys the silver. So I did it just seconds in. I looked over at the fixer and I went, 1/3 of that bottle is empty. Why? And I went, oh, I know why. I know what I did. So I pour it out. I give it a quick rinse. And I'm like, okay, developer now. And I just rush through just getting developer into it. And as it turns out, I actually managed to save it. But here's the second part. Anyway, that laziness. Usually I would use a rubber band because, like I said, the reels that I got didn't come with a little clip. The first few times I forgot to put that rubber band on there to make sure it stays in the water. Nothing bad happened. And by a few times, I mean, it was like months. Hey, lazy, you ruined your shots. Now, I was able to save through scanning and some Lightroom and Photoshop work. I was able to save the examples of my screw up and what they look like, considering this is ISO 800 and the reel was literally just sitting on top of the water. The top part is the part that got properly developed. The bottom part is like at least 3 stops below where it should be in terms of how much it's been developed. And it's not usable. It would have been fine if I had done things the way I had done them for years and then just suddenly decided, I'm going to take shortcuts for no reason that aren't even shortcuts. And here's another example. It's just sometimes it really is you. It really is you that does it to yourself. This one, I shot it too early. The person walking through, it's not even anything special. It could have worked out a little bit, I guess, as like a lead into a concept. If I had actually managed to do what I needed to do and develop the role. So anyway, this first roll finished off and I started walking around a little bit and I'm like, man, I haven't been here in a couple of years and I kind of miss the place. So this one is just kind of like I don't know. I was trying to go for a little bit of a leading line into the people walking. But what happened was, this was one of the shots that I took later on. This is the Tri-X pushed to 1600, because you can see the highlights are mostly gone. But you can save this if you were printing your negatives or you enlarging them. You kind of see where that like crane thing is. There's stuff there, but in the scanning, and it didn't really work or show up. And this was semi-stand developed, and it didn't quite give the negatives the speed that it should have been developed to. A DDX developer is supposed to be good for pushing, but in this case, I don't think I got my 1600. I remember metering this the scene, and I definitely should have a little bit more in the shadows, which have gone black, but that's fine because you've pushed a film 2 stops. It's still underexposure. You just compensate in development. So, you know, it's really not, you're asking film to do something that it's not really designed to do, even though people push Tri-X. But yeah, you push it, you get more contrast. It's not technically contrast, it's still underexposure that you're compensating for. But anyway, 645 is a big format, not big by medium format standards, big by digital format standards. It's bigger than GFX. It's bigger than any really medium format digital option we have available to somewhat normal people. I like 645, 6.6, 6x7, all of it, plus those extra shots you get in 645. So this one, what I saw versus this has parallax correction for when you're focusing, but it's not perfect. Parallax correction is not perfect. Now it's pretty close up. So what I was looking for here in terms of the concept or the idea that I had in my head was I was going to get the buildings and then the reflection into the car. So what was happening is this building at the top was kind of dropping down into a wedge, and then you had a white kind of like triangle leading back up into the buildings again, but those buildings were the reflections of the buildings down the street and across the street. Does it work? No. Does it look decent? Not really. Did I nail the composition that I was going for? No. Part of that is technical, and I forget to compensate placement of the camera. But you know, it's a learning process. It's practice. All right, next one. I mean, pretty straightforward, simple stuff. A little bit of rule of thirds. I do like the lines on the crosswalk, kind of leading with the people walking. And then after I developed it and I scanned the negatives, I noticed that there was this guy in the window. I think if I had realized it while I was there, I would have walked up, gotten a little closer, and kind of worked him into maybe having someone on the sidewalk downstairs as they're walking, or having them look up to, if they saw me pointing the camera up, they would kind of, people tend to do that. They follow the lens to look at what I'm looking at, and I could get like a little, you know, someone walking by looking up at that guy while he's in here moving around doing stuff. And that's also an example of just how much resolution 645 negatives have. Like, I've cropped way the hell in, and there's still room to keep cropping more. You can still like see the grain. So this is Tri-X at 1600, and it's just slightly underdeveloped, and you can still see that the grain that Tri-X is supposed to have, even in this massive crop, is fairly minimal, and I can keep cropping, and all that'll really do is increase the grain, and there's just seemingly an endless amount of resolution compared to 35 millimeter. And you know, I just took another shot again. This is me walking back kind of towards the train, and I realized these people walking with the sun in the background, kind of pushing those long shadows through, and I really liked it. I liked them walking by, and I think this is the best photo that I got that day. I do like it. I like that I was able to kind of get enough details in them with how I exposed it, but then you've got lots of details where the sun is, and you can see even at 1600, Tri-X is holding detail in the very brightest of brights. You can see those columns in the building in the back. That's the literal sun right next to them. I just happened to get it out of frame because I didn't want it to wash out the entire frame, because this lens, I'm not sure if it has the best coatings on it, but it is a very good lens. It's an f4 lens. That's one of the quirks of this camera. By medium format standards, that's fine. By, you know, trying to shoot an hour or a half hour before sunset, not a great tool. And also the rangefinder patch on this camera is incredibly difficult to see in challenging lighting situations. It really is. So this was the photo I took before that. You know, it's just kind of working up to what I wanted to get. So this was, these guys were like holding up their phone and they were gonna take a picture of the church. And of course I was a little late and they put their phones down. So it was gonna be 3 images of the church on their phones because it's medium format. You can also crop in and see all that. And then the actual photo that they were taking, like the photo on their phones and then the photo of them taking the photo anyway. This is just, I decided to get on the train. This is kind of the neighborhood where I was headed and decided to finish off the roll as I walked over to where I needed to go. You know, just standard city bike. Yeah, I mean, those are just, I mean, this one is the one I think that works the best out of a roll that I had a fairly limited time to shoot. But, you know, any day you can get out is a good day. I screwed up so bad in developing because I got lazy, but that's on me. In terms of like this camera is like a general purpose camera or just like an everyday kind of deal. It's great. It's not that big. It's not that heavy. It is big. It is a little bit heavy, but it's not that big. It's not that heavy. It's very easy to use. All the controls are on the lens, and it's a leaf shutter, and it's a leaf shutter that is doesn't sound like a leaf shutter. It's very loud. The highest shutter speed you get is 500, which, you know, you can shoot 800 on it. If you're shooting black and white, even color film, 800 speed film, you can shoot. You can shoot almost all day. You just can't shoot in late evening and into the night. That's fine. Of course, it's got that distance scale standard stuff. It has a meter in it, and the meter in it is actually really good, but it's not a TTL meter. So what you're looking at through the viewfinder and what the lens is seeing are going to be a little bit offset through parallax. And you just kind of have to learn that, hey, I'm metering for certain exposures in these areas. And I tend to either, depending on, you know, I'll meter off my hand or meter off shadows or midtones, and then I'll compensate my exposure based on that. You don't just point the meter at the shadows, meter, right? Get your exposure, set it, and then take a picture of the scene. No, you meter your midtones, your highlights, your shadows, and then you figure out where you want to put the exposure. That's kind of how things end up working after you've been shooting for a while. And you kind of just keep the zone system, the zone exposure system in your head. You know, at f4, it's a decent lens. At 5.6, f8, f11, it's an excellent lens. I don't have a hood for it. I don't really use lens hoods anyway, but it seems to have pretty good flare resistance. That's perfectly fine. It is a very compact lens. It has Fuji's EBC coating in it, which is the Electro Bara something. But the EBC lenses, film lenses, in my experience for Fuji, are really, really great. There's some forgotten lenses they have for 35mm too, which are excellent. And I use them on my digital cameras also. I adapt their M42 to digital, and they're just beautiful, especially for video and wide open. They're really, really good quality glass. They may not be as good for photography, for adapting for digital photos. I haven't done much of that, but yeah, all in all, a good day, good piece of gear, and me making an absolutely monumental, well, two monumental, just boneheaded mistakes. But I can chalk this up as a win because I got to go out and do what I love.